Our presentation today will focus on our service, the Strong Families Safe Kids Advice and Referral Line, and the transition our agency made from 2016 onwards to bring together 3 different organisations offering an intake and family support service function under one statewide structure. As part of this presentation, you'll hear from 3 presenters who are involved with our service. I'm Zaharenia Galanos, the manager of the Strong Families Safe Kids Advice and Referral Line, and I'm joined by Georgie, Sloan, a child safety, wellbeing and liaison officer from within the service, and Cribbin, a family support worker for a non-government organisation who's funded to provide family support by referral from the Advice and Referral Line. Thank you for your time today and for the invitation to take part in this conference. Before we start, we'd like to acknowledge and pay respects to the traditional owners and custodians of the land in which we meet today, and pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. We also wish to acknowledge those from the Aboriginal community that are with us today. Strong Families Safe Kids Advice and Referral Line is a collaboration that brought together 3 different organisations, Mission Australia, BAPCare and Children Family Services, offering an intake and family support function under one statewide structure. The aim of presenting our service today is to highlight the reasons for making this shift, the approach our service is based on, and how we've supported families thus far to make the transition to engaging with family services and supporting the system itself to move from meeting a mandatory requirement to a conversation about what the best action may be to help a family. Whilst today our aim will be to talk you through the background here, including the approach we use and the theory behind it, it will also be to engage with you on our outcomes so far, how we've evaluated the work we've undertaken, and how our team has evolved over time. In preparing for today's presentation, we've considered how best to demonstrate the key differences in approach and outcomes, so we will look to walk you through a case example that touches on how the Advice and Referral Line walked alongside a multidisciplinary team made up of family support services, extended family and clinical professionals to navigate away from the statutory process. The work we did in this case was extensive and over many months, so I hope the summary that we provide does justice to the powerful work in walking alongside this family to come up with their own solutions. I will hand over to Georgie and Christine to talk through that case example a little later. In 2016, Professor Maria Harries was commissioned by the Minister at that time to review the child protection system, which also included direct engagement with other services on the effectiveness of both the intake and gateway models. Some of you may be familiar with the slide above, which highlights the linear approach direct into child safety. Professor Harries' review highlighted many things, but one of the key areas of note was in the duplication and confusion experienced by the community as it related to really what was, in effect, 7 front doors across the community. So child safety intake in the north, south and northwest, gateway intake in Mission across the southeast and northwest, and BAPCare services north and south. International evidence shows that a robust and capable advice and referral service at the front of the child protection system can improve outcomes for children and their families and reduce the pressure on the statutory child protection service. In a number of consultations that occurred at the time, Professor Harries noted that both the intake and gateway services were being inundated with reports that arguably did not lead to a forensic statutory investigation, and that whilst well-intentioned and in part successful, the differential intake pathway and gateway was also under serious stress. I used the term duplication before. By way of duplication, I'm referring to the experience of families and community members being referred to or making contact with both the child protection intake and gateway, and little awareness or communication across these services on what this looked like. So we may have had 2 processes occurring in gateway and intake at the same time, both workers in these services making contact with the family and then coming to an impasse of sorts, on some occasions around who was best placed to take the lead, depending on what the issue was. So collectively, we would receive around 11,500 notifications to child safety across the state and about 7,000 additional notifications in gateway. And what we experienced, we collectively refer to as churn of families between these 2 areas. We know that of the referrals that we received, approximately 7% or so require a statutory child safety intervention. So our service, the Strong Families Safe Kids Advice and Referral Line, aims to address a better response for the 93%, ensuring that our way of working is more about partnership than a linear approach straight into the child safety service. As part of the redesign of the service, we reshaped our practice approach. The child safety intake model was premised on the notion of threshold and filtering referrals either into the child safety system or back out if a criterion is met or was deemed risky enough. Intake work assessed and looked for risk and aligned very much with the forensic assessment process on risk and really assessing whether a family were in or out rather than delving into what it was that the family needed. The This process generally enforces a systems check approach, with one of the last actions often being to engage directly with the family. The ARL approach is closely aligned with the Science of Safety framework in the Child and Youth Wellbeing Strategy and Professor David Thorpe's conversation approach. By conversation, I mean just that, seeking engagement with the caller as to what it is they're worried about, what they feel should happen, and engaging with them on who may be best placed to support or engage from that moment with the child family in their network. This isn't about pushing back on risk or work. This is about thinking through who is best placed to support a family and have that conversation directly with them, and helping as best as possible to unpick or unpack the complexity and working through with that family their need and asking them directly what would benefit them. Our service broadly manages a significant level of wellbeing matters, but also acute risk matters. So partnership is key to what we do. So with families, with the community, with our service partners across both the government and non-government sectors. Professor Thorpe worked closely with our teams to create the service and predicted, based on some of his work internationally, that if we were true to the model and this approach, that we would see a reduction overall in referrals to the Child Safety Service across the state, and that of those referrals, those matters that had been referred, we'd see an increase in substantiation. So what this means is not only do the cases that need to go through to Child Safety do so, but that the service response by Child Safety has become more targeted than it would have been in the previous model. I'll touch on our structure really briefly. So whilst the service itself is based in the south of the state, the workforce which sit under myself and the non-gov manager, so 6 teams, 37 staff, 6 team leaders, and a mix of government and non-government staff here, is supported by a regional liaison function across the state who act as a conduit between the team and the regional child safety service, between the team and the community, and to support the work of the advice and referral team through direct engagement with families in the region as needed. So liaison team is comprised of 4 community liaison officers in the northwest, 4 community liaison officers in the south, 2 community liaison officers in the north, 3 regionally based hospital liaison officers, and 3 Aboriginal liaison officers, with 1 statewide family violence liaison officer who works between the statewide FVCSS service and the advice and referral line. So our team not only focuses on direct support for families through the ARL, but the broader community around case consultations, support, multi-agency conferencing, walking families through to the family support service, and referrals to the intensive family engagement services. Alongside our liaison team members, we have clinical practice support and guidance delivered through clinical practice consultant and educators who work directly with staff and the leadership team on practice support, development and clinical decision making. I won't go too much further in terms of team composition. You may well have questions about that later perhaps, but I note this so you have a broader view of what the workforce itself looks like. So to demonstrate the transition we made from a linear child safety process to one focused on wellbeing of the whole family, partnership and supporting interventions that the family owned, I will hand over to Georgie Sloan, one of our liaison officers, who will talk through a specific case example and our approach.
As Zah said, my name is Georgie Sloan. I'm a Child Safety and Wellbeing Liaison Officer for the Strong Family Safe Kids Advice and Referral line. Today I will talk through a live case example to demonstrate the transition of working with families from a linear child safety process to the new way of working in ARL. This new way of working focuses on the wellbeing of the whole family, partnership and supporting interventions that are family owned. At the outset, I will note that we have sought permission from the family to include their details, de-identified of course, in this discussion, and note that our engagement with the family is ongoing and we still have regular points of contact since this piece of work. As per this slide, the main constellation of the family is a mother in her mid-30s who has 5 children between the ages of 3 to 18 years. To note, the older 3 children have a different father to the younger 2 children. The father of the 3 older children is deceased, and the father of the younger children has a good relationship generally with the family, including the older children. This father is around and is involved with the children on and off, depending on how his relationship is with the children's mother at the time. The extended family network includes a maternal grandmother in her late 50s who is the key support person in the wider family network that includes a complex network of extended family members, including the father, his side of the family, maternal side, aunts, uncles, cousins, and a variety of family. To note, child safety history for the family includes 6 previous notifications for the children, and the mother and father have a child safety history of involvement themselves in the past. This is important to note in the context of engagement and how we had to work hard in terms of creating and managing a relationship with the family and their broad network, given their on and off contact with child safety in the past. To add to the complexity of the family, the maternal grandfather died at the age of 37 from a degenerative genetic brain disease that the mother has recently been diagnosed with, and there is a high chance that her children may also suffer from this into the future. So the work began with the family in June 2019 when a referral to the Strong Family Safe Kids Advice and Referral was made around worries for the children. The worries at this time were around mum not engaging with her medical team who were monitoring her from a health point of view. There were worries around her presentation, her mental health, and significant breakdown of some of the relationships in the family and around the children. There were worries that the maternal grandmother was unable to manage the mother and the children as the mother's condition continued to deteriorate, particularly as her cognition became increasingly impaired. There were worries that due to the mother's impaired cognition that she was presenting increasingly as emotionally unstable and that the family were not capable of managing in the long term, with particular worries about what happens for the children when their mother passed away, which is a result of the genetic disease. ARL had a very clear push and direction at the point of our involvement to intervene and progress with statutory processes, so seeking legal orders and securing placement arrangements for the children, and this was escalated from the medical team involved with the family. I note this here specifically as in reality this is what we may well have done in the old intake system rather than slowing down and working with the family as the first action. Given the above and the request for someone to visit with the team, the medical team, the matter was referred to me in the liaison group from the advice and referral team. My role at this point was to engage the family with the medical team, complete a home visit and engage the family around the worries, have some open, honest conversations with them and work on building relationships with the family to understand their setup, who was in the family and who could be involved in helping to care for the children when their mother was unable to. Zah mentioned earlier that the family had our integrated family support service involved with them. Once I met with the family as a liaison with the medical team initially and built a relationship with the family, noting that they were very system and service scared, as often family are that we work with, we were able to support the children's mother with support of the maternal grandmother to accept referral into our integrated family support program. Once this referral was completed, the provider was a key link for all the services around the family, and this service worked overtime, often outside of their normal scope, in a creative, collaborative and flexible way in order to assist us to address the concerns that were coming from us from the medical folk. This is where the lovely Cribbin comes in, and you will be able to talk to her later in the presentation. Essentially at this time what we did was slow down and engage in a number of multidisciplinary meetings to be really clear on what the real worries are, to challenge the need for a quick forensic process and to work with the family to find an outcome that would support them to remain together. The initial meetings with the medical team focused on role clarification, the difference between the ARL and child safety system, given the push for a statutory response, us being clear on the diagnosis for the mother, how this impacted on her functioning, and concerns from the medical team around longer-term planning for the children in this context. We mapped out these initially in a multi-agency meetings, and the fact that whether this was an ARL or child safety service response was that we needed to engage with the family and how this was best achieved given the ongoing relationship with the IFS worker. We were clear on the medical trajectory for the mother, but impressed upon the medical folk the need to support the family to come up with their own plan, rather than this being imposed on them, and that we needed to be able to demonstrate this effort. IFS were brought into the multi-agency model, again with a clear brief on what the diagnosis was, the mother's presentation, and getting agreement on how IFS could provide assistance. At this point, the family continues still, after over 12 months of work, to engage with Chris, given the amazing relationship she has built with the family. Again, IFS here were pivotal and assisted in the relationship repair with the medical team. Unfortunately, there had been significant damage in the relationship between the family and the medical team before ARL became involved, and over time we were lucky to see a change in staff here, which assisted in re-establishing a working relationship between the family and the medical team. IFS maintained home visiting through COVID and supported a process of a family group conference. They undertook joint home visiting with myself as a liaison officer when we had transparent conversations on the worries with the mother and the maternal grandmother, who at that point was mum's primary support. Over time, the wider family network supported the need to come together and plan for the future, not only around the care of the children, but on ways in which to maintain medical support for mum. This resulted in supporting mum and the children to move to a new house to be closer to the family network as well. This also included mum re-engaging with her medical team and accepting their help and support around her condition. So, I guess in sum up, what were the outcomes of this change in approach that we used for this family? In one positive aspect, the children have been able to remain with their mother as long as possible, and the family have worked together with their IFS worker over almost 18 months of engagement to keep this going. The family remain engaged with the medical team and IFS, and there is open and clear communication between the areas. ARL have and are involved as touch points currently given deterioration in the mother's presentation and consideration on guardianship for the mother. But we will put the plan to test and have a review around this as time goes on. Now I will pass back to Zah, who will sum up around the Strong Family Safe Kids Advice and Referral line.
The above example, whilst presented briefly here, was in fact quite complex when you consider the different lens each service comes to the table with. Essentially, what we wanted to demonstrate here through a brief overview is our path to come to the table willingly, to be open about how our process is managed, and to try and support families to drive their own solutions, much more than we would have considered doing in our previous practice model. The ARL has been operational for 2 years and has had an ongoing relationship with Professor David Thorpe. Professor Thorpe undertook a 12-month review which provided positive feedback on the service so far and broadly achieving what was predicted. So lower number of referrals to child safety across the region, a high substantiation rate of those matters that have progressed for a child safety assessment, and families contacting the service themselves to seek advice and support. The above graphic shows the contacts made to the service since go live and how we responded over that period. By way of ongoing evaluation, this hasn't just been about Professor Thorpe's input. The ARL, as one of the first areas of the broader Strong Families Safe Kids project, has been independently evaluated by the University of Tasmania, and we've also evaluated our effectiveness along the way via our own procedures, processes, and following staff feedback. Our interest is in broadening this out, ensuring that we have a consistent way of capturing the voice of families and how they experience our service over time. The ARL is unique in that we are the only jurisdiction working this way and in such a close partnership with our NGO colleagues. And we've had direct engagement with other jurisdictions who are at different stages of their own reforms on how our service has been built so far to support their learning and development.
That was perfect. Thank you guys so much for that. So let's now welcome Zaharenia, Georgie and Christine to the screen. Hi. So we do actually have a few questions to go through, so we might just jump in if that's all right with you guys.
Yep.
Yeah, perfect. So our first question is, has there been any formally provided feedback from families and children? And if so, what was this?
Okay, so yes, we went through, last year we tested a bit of a pilot around some feedback and how best to change our service based on direct feedback from families. Didn't necessarily work particularly well. I think we need to revisit how we structured the feedback or survey blitz, I guess we called it. But we're really keen on developing that further and having live feedback from families about their experience with our service. At the end of the day, we're here to support the broader community. We want to make sure that our service delivery works for them. So yes and no, but a work in progress, if that makes sense.
And I think we also have to take into account that we started this pilot sort of contacting families directly after they called ARL during COVID. So that I think impacted a lot on what was going on at the time.
True.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for that. So our next question is, how are you sourcing your clinical practice consultants, and is this internally or externally provided?
So we've got clinical practice consultant educators that are internal. So we have CPCEs, I'll abbreviate, across all areas of the child safety continuum. So ARL, when we went live, had specific staff allocated for our clinical support. So their role is across the floor, day-to-day guidance, clinical decision-making, support, unpacking and supporting our staff unpack really complex matters and helping us navigate a way forward when we might be a little bit stuck. So internal.
Perfect, thank you. The next question I have is, the case study you've provided is heavily client-driven, but how do you engage and work with clients who don't want to drive or engage with this process?
Yeah.
You want one?
Oh, yeah, I can take that one. Look, really tricky. I think that we often do that in the liaison space. So we're often going out seeing clients, especially when they are not wanting to engage. I think that's just still about pursuing them and trying to have an open, honest conversation with them that we're really worried and we're here to look at, support for you and help for you. And we don't want to have you end up in the child safety service because of those worries. We're very clear that we are a different service to the child safety service, that we are a referral pathway in, but we're not the child safety service. So I think that often will help us engage with people that don't want to have open conversations. But look, at the end of the day, if we can't engage a family and we still are worried, that's probably when we do.
I think it's also probably worth noting that there was a lot of, whilst it was only really a brief presentation, I guess, on that case example, significant work around working alongside the family because we were in and out and there was a lot of back and forth, I guess, before that engagement, progressed to the positive outcomes that we got. So, and again, ongoing touch point from an ARL point of view.
Yeah. And I mean, you often get that in the if space as well too, Chris, don't you?
Yeah.
Talk to
So often or sometimes we may come across a family that don't really want to engage, and I think a lot of it is about building relationships with families, and I think that is the key. And then from my perspective, if I'm worried, then getting one of the liaisons to come out and support those conversations, because a lot of families or some families are actually quite scared of services. So,
and that case study was that was a very brief overview. I mean, the actual point to get Chris involved in an IFS capacity actually took me almost 3 to 4 visits to build that relationship with the family. They were very against any sort of family support to start with, but once I sort of built that relationship with them over a couple of visits, and talking about simple parenting support that Chris could provide and what the role was, I think that kind of worked better. Yeah.
But even that in this example, it took me probably another further 3, maybe even more months just to build that confidence and trust. Initially, they were really wary about me even coming inside the house. So it took a lot of patience and support from my agency to be able to be flexible around engaging with getting a family to engage.
Okay, lovely, thank you. So the next question that we have is, what was the time frame you were working with the family you mentioned?
Ongoing.
Ongoing still. That work started in 2019 when I first, so a referral came into the ARL, and that's when the worker in the ARL asked for a liaison to assist. The medical team initially wanted someone to do a joint visit, so that's where I was brought in. And like I said, it's been ongoing since that time. That was June 2019. I think we referred to Chris in about, I want to say November that same year. We had a family group conference the next year, just prior to COVID, I think.
Just before
COVID. So, and Chris and I went out and saw the family again probably another month ago now, a couple of weeks. Yeah, so it's ongoing really. So, and that's kind of the transition from the old sort of intake that we used to have at child safety. Really,
I think the other
in
thing,
and out of conversation.
Yeah, I think the other thing, noting that's been such a length of time, is some of the feedback, from the medical team themselves. Because I think there's quite a bit of an education, I guess, and bringing them along the way around how we were hoping to work with the family. And I won't speak for you, Chris, but you met with them yesterday.
I did meet with them yesterday, and I was really pleased when the head medical guy said this is a demonstration of how services can actually work collaboratively with families, which has been really good, because one of the things that we had been doing was having probably monthly catch-ups, and that was with the medical people, with Georgie, myself, and all the people who were actually involved with working with the family. So and that was huge, because initially I found the medical side of it was a very different model to the way I work. So that was great.
Okay, thank you. The next question we have now is, what is the process for your staff when engaging with young people, and how is this achieved?
Engaging with young people, it's kind of the same way we engage families, I guess. You know, if we have a young person that calls in and wants support, we'll do that on the phone. Our service is phone-based, but if someone wants to meet outside or they want a face-to-face visit, that comes to the liaison team as well. Or the ARL staff sometimes do come out with us to do those visits. So the ARL guys sometimes will do that if they have capacity and not busy with phones. So so it's kind of the same way we do with parents. And
we'd like to see more engagement direct with young kids and young people.
We like to do that, and we do a lot of community in the liaison space, and often say, you know, encourage children and families and parents to call us directly, because, you know, we're really open to that.
Great, that's perfect. It's really good to hear. So I also have a question. So is a call made to family immediately after each concerned check-in?
I'll keep going.
Not immediately. You mean when someone calls in straight away and has a worry about a family? No, we obviously we would talk to the caller first who calls in and ask them what their thoughts are on that. You know, is the family open to this? Do they know you're calling? You know, we want to work very openly and transparently, but we also don't want to scare people off.
Well, the thing is, and if we've got a caller making contact with the service seeking a family support referral, you know, and the family don't know about it, you know, it's a really difficult to engage in that context. So we're always asking the question of our callers, you know, do the family know, you know, what is their understanding of this call being made, and then engaging directly with them about, you know, transparently around the worries and where to from here, essentially.
Okay. And then the next question we have is, are all interagency meetings family inclusive?
Ooh, good one.
Good. I would like for all of them to be. I think, you know, that's absolutely what we aspire to in a care team kind of approach, really, and involving young people as well. They are, you know, part of, they need to know where, you know, we need to hear exactly their voice and where they want to go. I think there are some areas that might, sometimes it's a little difficult to get all agencies, I guess, on the same page around that. So we might come to the table willingly, as we have in this case, and talk through around, you know, well, where are the family in this, and, you know, what's their thoughts and so forth. And I think sometimes we experience that agencies want to get to know where to before the families are brought in. We want to flip that a little bit.
And I think in this case study is probably a good example of that as well, because the child that was 18 now was actually 17. Had just, I think, turned 17, or was it probably even 16 when I started working with them. So we actually brought her voice into it very early on. She was sort of the, you know, alternate sort of caregiver at the time for the younger children as well. So she was brought into the discussions all the time. Yeah, she was brought in at the time of the conference.
Yeah, I think in this case it was possibly one of the most inspiring things I've been involved in, because the family, they really had a big say in how they wanted things to go. So it was driven by the family, and we're talking a quite complex family, uncles, grandparents, and the children's voice was very much in the forefront of how it was going to look, and the mum as well.
Yeah, I think you know, whilst I think this experience or this family scenario is probably one of the first that we had a formal FGC from an ARL perspective, and we'd like to see a lot more of that. I think the time it takes to slow down, to engage and plan with the family and bring everyone around the table to plan with them was incredibly powerful. And I think there's so much capacity for us to be doing that, you know, earlier, I guess, in terms of CS intervention, and ARL's absolutely part of that.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the time we do ask the question in the liaison space. We're often going into care team meetings and lots of multidisciplinary sort of interagency meetings, and we often will ask curiously, have the children's voice, have we heard the children's voice here? What do the parents think? Has anyone had a conversation with the parent or the child? And if not, that's probably something we suggest is the first thing that we need to do next after that meeting. So it's something we do really strongly, you know, encourage.
Perfect, thank you. Our next question now is, do you have a roundtable discussions to find the best service and support systems in collaboration with SFSK and look outside the box?
Yes. Lots of those. So we've got a system internally we refer to as weekly review. So we bring together myself, our non-gov manager, Rachel Hales, our liaison folk, relevant team leaders, frontline staff, and external people, depending on the need at the time, to look at next steps and to really unpack where to from here. We don't always have the answers, but I think it's a good opportunity to grab people around the table and plan collectively around where to from here to support families. That might involve, people from CS who might have had experience with the family before. It might involve, folk from Department of Education who are directly involved with, young people out in the community, or other services. So really trying to table, that review or multi-D conversation to who is, is involved with the child or young family.
Yeah, and we also do that in the youth space as well. Yep. So we actually, the liaisons, manage the allocation process. So families that we want to get extra family support, like referring for someone like Chris, goes to a meeting weekly where the services, the head of the services, the NGO services sit around together and look at the cases that are referred through and work out who's the best fit for what service, and who's going to work best with the family with all the different multi-agencies that we work with. So yeah, so I think that's a good process as well.
Okay, thank you very much. We just have one more question now. So not all families have the same idea about good enough parenting, especially from a cultural diversity perspective. How does your system work in that space?
Oh, that's a tricky one.
You want that one?
Look, I think it probably goes back. Yeah, I think it probably goes back to that. In ARA, we, as I said before, we don't think that we have all the answers. So look, if we do have families in of a different diversity or call background, we often will bring in experts in that sort of area. So we'll bring in people like the Migrant Resource Centre or the Phoenix Centre, or depending on what the issue is. So I think we're very good at seeking advice if we don't know how to work with a family, especially, and we have our Aboriginal liaison officers in our service. So look, hopefully we can build on that a bit more over time.
I think the one thing in the first 12 months of us being operational, we looked at co-location models of other services coming in and sitting alongside us. So that obviously got a little bit difficult in COVID times. So we enjoyed really good partnerships with, say, CAMS and other services, and really, looking to explore people like MRC and other services to come in and be part of that, upskilling and supporting our staff. So we need to be a bit more flexible around that, given our limitations are on people across the floor, given COVID and so forth.
Okay, well, as I said, that is all the questions we have for now. Do you guys have any final remarks or anything you want to add today?
No, I don't think so. Thank you very much for your time.
Yeah.
Oh, no, thank you for coming along today. We might start the process then of closing up shop. I'd just like to start by saying thank you so much to all of our participants, and thank you so much you guys for joining us today. That was a really wonderful, informative presentation. I feel like I got a lot out of that. I'm sure the rest of our participants do as well. And yeah, that is our last workshop for the conference today. That concludes.
Oh, there you go. Thank you, Jess.
Thanks,
okay.
Jess.
Take care.
Yeah, you too. Thank you. Bye.